paragraph-based board games. So this is a type of board games that will have a board, but the things that happen on the board will instruct from time to time the players to check a manual, a book that comes with short text organized by paragraphs that represent events that happen in the world of the story. Recently I reviewed Agents of Smersh, which is based on that idea. It is a mechanic that has been pretty successful in the last decades. The first game of this kind, as far as I know, should be The Voyage of the BSM Pandora from the late 70s. It also had a sequel. The Voyage was a magazine game. The sequel I found in a box game. The sequel is The Wreck of the BSM Pandora. In the 80s, we have Tales of the Arabian Nights that also has been remade in a more recent version. And this is a system that is fun, is exciting, and it works very well for adventure games and games about exploration because due to the paragraph system where the content is buried somewhere in the book, you do not know in advance what you're going to find, as opposed to a game where you're placing all of the monsters at the beginning, then you know right there. All that can be found is on the board already. It's just a matter of the emerging configurations that gameplay will create, rather than, wow, look what was in there, who knew? And card systems, games that have event cards have a similar idea, but the paragraph system just allows a lot of variety, a lot of joy for the discovery, a lot of surprises, and a lot of fun stuff that can be added to the game as the game progresses. What you do not see very often is the paragraph system, the paragraph-based mechanic applied to Eurogame type of games. Again, the system works very well with adventure, exploration, and it seems almost counterintuitive, given the traditional association of this kind of mechanic, to see it in a game about developing a village where you're getting new villagers, building new buildings, collecting resources, selling resources. It doesn't get any more Eurogamey than that when you have those elements, and yet to associate that with a paragraph-based system seems unusual, seems very unusual, and yet it is something that has been done in the game Above and Below. This is a game where you are, in fact, developing your own village, recruit villagers, train villagers, purchase goods, harvest goods, build new buildings, etc., etc. Settlers solve whatever this is. So this is a little village here. But at the same time, in there where you're developing the village, there are caves so that you have a chance to explore, to find resources, to collect things, and to actually find new areas where you can build stuff. You can build outposts in the system of caves which is near the village that you're trying to build above ground. So Above and Below, pretty much a game for when you want to play a Eurogame, to develop a little village and to create a resource engine without forgetting about the joy of exploring a dungeon from time to time. And what you have here is that the part above of the game is 100% purely Eurogamey, worker placement type of thing. But when you go to the dungeon, actually, there is a system of paragraphs. There's a book of paragraphs that will describe the adventures that you will encounter. Strange hybrids between theme and mechanics that usually you do not see together in a single game. Let's see how that hybrid was handled, that hybrid idea was handled in Above and Below. Each player uses a board, such as this one, to keep track of several pieces of information and, most importantly, of the availability of their villagers. Each player starts with a pool of 3 villagers. When the villagers are ready to act, they sit in this area here, the ready area of the board. Then, when you use them to perform actions, they will be placed in the exhausted area or in the injured area in case they were exerted and bad stuff happened to them. And then they will become available again through a procedure that happens at the end of the turn. So villagers are represented by these tiles here. You see symbols here such as the hammer and the quill. These symbols represent actions that they can perform. Villagers also have dice that are associated with lantern symbols, and those dice are used when the villagers are sent to explore the caves, so when you send them dungeon crawling, pretty much. Also, each player starts with a card representing a building that they have at the beginning with a number of beds. The number of beds indicates the number of villagers that you can refresh at the end of a turn, make available again to perform actions next turn. Then there's also a general track, a general board that is placed in the middle of the table at the beginning. It has a reputation track. Each player has a reputation value with a symbol associated with the color, with a cube associated with the color on their board. Reputation goes up and down depending on actions that are performed during the game. There's a turn track. The game lasts 7 turns. A barrel of cider is available each turn, and a player can get it. We'll explain later how. And here you have an area where you can purchase villagers. This is the cost that it takes to purchase the villagers. You pay the corresponding cost, for example, 2 for this guy this turn. At the end of a turn, this area is refreshed by adding new villagers to it and sliding down the ones that are still there at the end of the turn. Now, what happens during a turn? What do you do during a turn? As I said, you will spend actions. You will use your villagers to perform actions. And let's start with the action that is fun and exciting, the one that is most unusual to find in a game where you develop a village, which is, of course, to explore the caves. And to explore the caves, you will use this rule book here, well, this encounter book here. You will also use dice and this deck of cards that represent possible encounters. You will receive a card when you decide to spend some of your villagers to perform that action. Well, at first you select those villagers. You need to send at least 2 down the cave. Suppose that this turn I want to send these 2 people, then I remove them from there. I take them out of the board, then I take a card from this deck and I roll a die, which indicates the exact specific paragraph that I'm going to read. And here, for example, 197. The encounter book has lots of paragraphs, some that correspond to sections that you will turn to directly because instructed from the die roll based on the card that you received. Some other ones you reach by moving there from other paragraphs, meaning some paragraphs will give you, I'm not showing you the book really well, so you don't have spoilers. But some paragraphs will give you some options, things that you can choose to do. Then you decide what to do, and then you turn to the corresponding paragraphs. Or better, to be more accurate, the player holding the book will instruct you about the possible options that you have. You'll decide what to do, and then the other player will turn to the paragraph and read out loud the instructions to you. You should not read the instructions for the encounters that you yourself are facing, because you should know what the content of the encounter is. You should know what the challenge is, but you should not know what the rewards for each choice are. And I'm reading you the encounter, not showing it to you, so that you don't know what the rewards are. You hear a dreadful digging and sniffing sound ahead, a noise suggesting both hunger and a complete comfort in total darkness. The sound somehow succeeds at being deeply disconcerting and oddly endearing, all at once. The options for the players are to run and hide, in which case the player has to take an explore test of level 3, or overcome your dread and approach cautiously, in which case the player that is using the book will turn to paragraphs 141, which are different from the one we're reading, and will read you the next, what happens next, which may or not present you with other challenges. A lot of the encounters will present you with challenges like the ones that I told you. Explore 3, or say, would be stuff like Explore 5, or Fight 6, or Run 2, and stuff like that. So each challenge is associated with a number, which is the target number that you're trying to meet or exceed. For each villager that you have, you need to send at least 2, but you could send more if you want to have better odds to passing the challenges. For each villager that you have, you roll a die, indicating which villager you're rolling for. Okay, I'm rolling a die for this guy. In this case, if I roll at least a 2, this villager produces a lantern for me. This villager, if I roll 1 or 2, produces a single lantern. If I roll a 3 or more, produces 2 lanterns, not 3, not the total. Simply you get the number associated with the highest result they were able to meet or exceed. So actually these 2 villagers will produce a maximum of 3 lanterns. Lanterns are the number of success points, hit points, call them whatever you want, that you need to use to pass those tests. A test of difficulty 3 will require 3 lanterns to pass it. It's also possible after you roll that you are pretty close to pass the test and you really want to pass it. Then you can exert your villager. Each villager that you exert goes in the injured area and allows you to add an extra success, an extra lantern to the test. There are also other ways of collecting extra points in those tests thanks to game effects. At the end, the result is that if you pass the test, the player that has the book will tell you what the rewards are, and you may gain resources, money, goods. We'll talk about the goods in a bit. Or if you fail, then, well, too bad for you, you failed. You have to face the consequences, and the reader of the encounter will let you know what those are. Dungeon explorers that have not been exerted go to the rest area. They just count as exhausted, not injured. Also, if you were successful, you get the benefits that come from the encounter, and you also get the card that represents an area that now you control or you know very well, and now you can build in. So you add it there to your area where you have, well, again, new cave areas that you know, and where you also place buildings that you construct. Now, talking about the other actions in the game, an action that you can perform in it is to build. To build, you need to spend a villager that has the hammer icon. You place the villager in the exhausted area, and then you can purchase a building. There are various sources. There are some key buildings, that these buildings with a key symbol. They are placed at the beginning of the game. They represent some initial available buildings. Star buildings, very special, very expensive buildings that you buy usually later in the game because they are super expensive, but they give you a lot of interesting effects and mainly ways of scoring a lot of victory points towards the end of the game. Also, other possible buildings are buildings that come out of this deck. There will be 4 available at any given time. You buy the associated cost and you get the benefit. The benefit may be that you get resources. For example, if I build this building, I add it there, and I also add 2 pair symbols. You see those 2 dots indicate that I get 2 resources of that kind. Maybe I want to buy this building later. I build it there. Should build them in a line by here. I'll place it there. Also, you can build buildings underground. You can build outposts if you have cave cards available to place them on. They have a lot of good effects. They're usually cheaper to build, so that is the advantage. But again, you have to have explored the dungeon successfully to get these buildings with the associated advantages. For example, here I put it on there. I got 2 of those resources. I also got a potion from that, so I'll add it to my play area. It's good. The potion allows me to heal people that are injured. So just a lot of different effects, but as you can see, a lot of these effects will give you resources that are represented by these tokens. These tokens here. When you gain these tokens, you can put them out there in that area of your box, offering them to other people to buy. Other people can buy them from you, or you can save them for later, or you can put them in this area here, which is the advancement track. The advancement track, you put them in order from left to right, and each time that you have a new resource, you put it in the rightmost space that is available. When you have a resource that you already have there, you put it on top of the resource that you already have. You don't simply add them to the track. This is for building, and also an important thing is harvesting, because actually, yes, the resources when you build the buildings get here, and you may be able sometimes to get them directly if you get them from game effects, but if they are on the building, then you spend an action, the harvest action, to collect to collect your resources. Then you spend the citizen, you spend the villager, you put it in the exhaust area, and you collect the resource from one of your boards. You may train. A train simply means to acquire new villagers from this area here. Then you need to use for that a villager that has the quill. Put the villager in the exhaust area. Purchase a villager from this area, spending the corresponding cost that you have there. Other action is to labor. Then you simply place a villager from this area to the exhaust area and you get a coin, as simple as that. But the first player that labors in a turn also gets the cider, which is neat because it allows you to refresh extra characters at the end of the turn. These are the main actions: explore, build, harvest, train, or labor. There are also free actions such as buy a good from a player if any is available, put something for sale, refresh the building row in case the buildings available are not interesting to you, then you may pay a coin to do that. And you continue like this until players usually have exhausted all of their villagers or they decide not to use all of their villagers and they pass. When all players have passed because they have been forced to, not having villagers, or they have decided to, the round is over. Then the turn is over. You record that, a new cider marker goes there, available for next turn. Also, people refresh their villagers. You get to refresh a number of villagers equal to the number of beds that you have available. In this case, I can refresh all of those. And if I have other villagers here with 4 beds, I get to refresh that too. I may spend the cider to refresh an extra villager, and I may spend a potion in case I have an injured villager to move the injured villager from here to the exhausted area. You also collect income here at the bottom of your player's board. You see your income level. You start with an income of 4, and then the rightmost area in this advancement track that is occupied by a good indicates the current income. So in this case, this player has a current income of 7. You collect that income, which is good because you're going to need it next time. And the turn is over at that point when players have gone through this procedure. You start the next turn. At the end of the 7th turn, the player with the highest total victory points is the winner of the game. How do you score victory points? From a lot of different sources. The advancement track. Each box, as you can see, is associated with 2 numbers. One is the income level and one is the victory point level. So for each good that you have on the advancement track, you score the corresponding amount of points. This spot here is worth 3 victory points for me. Each fish that I have here is worth a victory point. You score points for the buildings. Each building that you have is a victory point. Reputation, the player with the highest reputation scores points, and different players also may get to score points based on the rankings and the reputation, and based also on the number of players that you have. There are reputation bonuses also that are on the reputation track. In addition to that, card bonuses. Some cards, a lot of buildings actually have extra victory points. Pretty much every time that you see a symbol with the victory points on one of your cards, you get to score it. Sometimes that is dependent on resources. You total the victory points that you have from all sources, and at that point, the player with the highest total is the winner of the game. So strange combo of things really, and very different things, because placing workers to create certain resources, then you sell to score points, feels very different to me from going down, quote unquote, the dungeon. They don't call it as such, but we know what the reference is. We know why people are interested in exploring caves. This going down the dungeon, and yes, there's some strange stuff down there. I'm not going to spoil to you what is to be found there, but if nothing else, you can see that there are humanoid monsters. You see it from the cover, so I don't think that's so much of a spoiler. And there are some other fun, interesting things to be found there. And the 2 elements, the Eurogame element and the adventure type paragraph-based element, go together well. Actually, I really enjoyed the possibilities that the adventure element brings to the Euro element, a certain breath, a certain vitality that comes from from that aspect that reinvigorates to me even the Euro system. Because yes, you can play it as one of these cold, dry, calculating, economic heavy Euro games where just invest in this and get in that and get that increment, reinvest it into this, reinvest into that, You feel like you're preparing sort of like a financial plan. And if I was really good at doing those things, maybe be doing that kind of stuff in real life and be doing investments rather than playing board games. So I'm not terrible at that. I'm just not a very strong economic player. So when I'm a little bit behind and I'm like, oh, my economic engine is not working nearly as well as that of the other players, I have a chance of trying my luck. That is, the adventure element has a random element. There's the joy and fun of exploring, finding strange situations, weird dungeon type of encounters. But as a result, you can also gain resources surprisingly, unexpectedly, and the amount of resources and the type of resources cannot be predicted in advance. So to me, that is something that really adds interest to the other element too, because yes, you may be sitting there with your computer mind and you have created all of your financial plan for the next 6 turns, and then something happens that you did not expect, and then you also are forced to work around that. It just brings enough randomness to me to keep things interesting, even if you're just planning to play as a developer. It keeps things interesting because it presents challenges. It forces you to change course by, for example, changing the combination of available resources, bringing in income for a player that you thought you didn't have to worry about, bringing in new villagers. So I like that element of the unexpected that may emerge from the dungeon. There's also symbolic beauty of like when players go down the dungeon, you have no idea what's coming out of there, but what's coming out of there can then be reinvested as resources. So you have a Eurogame type of thing where things change as the game progresses, bringing you surprises, again, forcing you to to pay attention, to be engaged. You can't just rest and relax and wait for your perfectly planned course of action to play out by itself, because the context around you changes in ways that are unpredictable, but they do not feel too crazy. A single exploration down the dungeon, like exploration by one of your opponents, by itself is not going to lose you the game. It will simply add new elements for the player that completed the mission and for you to work around opportunities and possibilities rather than determinism based on luck. There is a luck element down there which is strong, but not such to me to completely destroy the design or to make it non-meritocratic or to reduce the interest that you have in creating your strategy and then adjusting it as things go along. It is also a game that in a certain sense allows you to dare more even when you're just doing the settling Euro part, because sometimes when I'm playing these games where you invest money, you buy resources, then I know myself, I stretch myself too much, I remain without cash, and then I lag behind as the more prudent players, the ends of the fable that have been collecting resources slowly improve their condition and get out of me as I have a wonderful setup but maybe no cash and I get stuck there without being able to do anything. This is the case? Well, let's go down the dungeon. So actually, even as a settler, as a planner, you can dare more, because even if you are low on cash, there's always the free option of going down there and see what happens. And maybe you'll get punished, or maybe you'll get an unexpected reward, but definitely there is fun to be had in that element that you can be a little less obsessive with cash. I really want to buy that building because I like the game effect, and next turn, whatever, I won't be able to build anything, to train anybody, but I know that I can go down there and let's see what happens. So really, to me, the dungeon element, which seems so foreign at first, works well with the other elements. It adds to the vitality of the role experience. It's more fun to me to play a game which is about investment and resources and allocating workers, where I know that in case things don't go well, I miscalculated, I can go down a dungeon, find some monsters, or try to escape from some monsters, face some strange situation, and and go back and go back from there and get another chance, getting some resources, some cash that they can use to invest, etc., etc., etc. Fun. The two elements to me go surprisingly well together. I'm very pleased with this game. I found it very enjoyable. Replay value, yes, that is a concern, of course, because some of these encounters are choose your own mini adventure. Once you decide what to do and you figure out the outcome of a certain situation, if you find yourself in this situation again, then you can make your decisions with a level of clarity and knowledge that maybe you shouldn't have, that you would be more excited if you didn't have. But I don't know how that can be resolved. I guess expansions can be created with new manuals, with new content being released. As such, you have a pretty good amount of encounters here. I don't think it's going to be all that soon before you start facing the same encounters again, and the knowledge that you have from previous encounters matters. Because after all, if I get a certain encounter and there is only like a certain test at the end, yes, I've seen the encounter before, I know the reward, but it's not a big thing. But if it's an encounter where I need to make a choice to reach a certain test and I kind of remember what the choices correspond to, then it's a different story. Then I have that kind of advantage. But again, there aren't so many encounters that would be affected by your previous knowledge of the encounters themselves. It may be a while before you face the same encounter of that kind twice. So I don't see that as being a big concern. What I think is big in this game is the fun that you can have, the enjoyment that I derive from playing above and below. Very original, very fresh, very unique design. I'm happy to see when designers take chances, take risks, and clearly putting together mechanics so different from one another in a single game was a risk, and I'm happy that the designer did take it because the result is one that is very pleasant to play.